Welcome back to the Stronger by Science Fireside Chat series. I'm your host, Greg Nuckols. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Eric Trexler. Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing well. If you like the podcast, make sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever one would do that. If you're interested in keeping up with the exercise and nutrition science content we put out, you could sign up to our newsletter. Or if you're interested in some help reaching your strength, physique, performance goals, you should check out Stronger by Science Coaching. Links to both of those things will be in the show notes. If you're interested in getting cheap supplements for even cheaper yet, check out bulksupplements.com and use the code SBSPOD at checkout for a 5% discount. If you're interested in a research review, check out Mass. If you are a newfound refugee from MyFitnessPal, you're awash in a sea without barcode scanning, maybe check out Macro Factor. That is our nutrition app. The link to that will also be in the show notes. And finally, for people who commented about the last episode, about me saying I'm the host and doing the intro, that's on you. That's not on me. You need to check out the Stronger by Science Fireside Chat lore a little bit more in depth. Eric is the host of the regular episodes. I am and have always been the host of the Fireside Chats. So anyway, just if you come for the king, you better not miss. Like you think you know the Fireside Chats, but you don't. So this is my domain.
Is there like a wiki yet where people can get, because like with Game of Thrones, there's like a whole wiki where they can get all the backstories and histories?
I mean, I imagine a wiki for the Stronger by Science podcast would be basically the Q&A page that's already on the website with explanations of our like 3 inside jokes.
Yeah. Yeah. So as everyone knows,
really not inside jokes, just obvious running bits. Yeah.
The podcast co-host union that you founded got really aggressive when we were at the discussion bargaining table and overreached pretty aggressively. But you are technically, in the eyes of the law, the host of the Fireside Chats. That is true.
Correct.
With regards to last week's episode, I have a big clarification because I was thinking about it after we recorded. I mentioned my disinterest.
Excuse me, I'm the host of this.
Okay.
All right, so now let's transition into the clarification segment of this show. All right, take it away.
Yeah, so I mentioned that I have a general disinterest and lack of curiosity when it comes to gadgets and even the most basic of technologies. And I didn't provide the most effective examples to really clarify that. So a few things that I think really solidify that point. I was an extremely late adopter for smartphones. I truly did not want one until my parents essentially insisted, because we were on like a family phone plan, and they're like, well, we are all getting them and it's going to change our plan. So like you must have one now. Yeah. I got that phone and I kept it for 10 years.
Hell yeah.
Which in smartphone years is 150 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to the point, I'm sure you recall, when we were alpha testing for Macro Factor, Corey and Rebecca, our developers, when I brought my phone out, they treated it like a museum exhibit. They're like, oh my God, I didn't know these were still supported. Mm-hmm. Are they still supported? And that was like one of our biggest development, like our fail safe was like, if it works on Eric's phone, it will work on every phone in existence that isn't essentially a rotary phone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had an iPhone 5 for like 10 or 11 years. And then it eventually died. And I went to the store and said, do you have anything that is very close to this? And I got a phone that was like 4 years old or something. Mm-hmm. Same thing, even with basic things like glasses. I've had the same pair of glasses for 13 years. I don't have a backup pair. I've just been living on the edge like that. And I'm like, I'm sure it'll be fine forever. And so far, it's been fine.
Seems good.
But I'm sure if I ever go to the eye doctor, they're going to be like, hey, have you not been to the eye doctor in like half a decade? And I'll be like, yeah, that's correct.
Do you wear contacts?
Sometimes.
Okay.
What I do with contacts, God, someone who knows something about eyes is going to absolutely destroy me for this. but I basically got like the single day use ones.
Yeah.
And I got 5 years worth. Or
Yeah.
no, I got a year's worth. But I usually can use a year's worth of contacts for like 5 or 6 years.
Nice. Yeah.
So I went to the eye doctor 13 years ago and then like 6 years ago. And I've been fine with all of my vision related needs, but I'm sure somebody's listening is just like, oh my God, what is wrong with him? Another simple one, I use my headphones daily, but my biggest complaint has always been like they're Bluetooth compatible, but there's not a cord, and sometimes I really want to plug them in.
Yeah.
And I was also annoyed they don't have like a carrying case, so I beat them up when I put them in the gym bag, put them in my backpack. So I just made peace with those limitations and didn't really investigate further. It turns out they do have a cord and a carrying case. I just forgot. I had no idea. So yeah, when it comes to gadgets and technologies, I just like get something that fulfills the basic use case, and I never explore it further.
Yeah.
Now moving on to new stuff.
Actually, before we move on to that, one more announcement. Should have made this at the top of the show. If you're listening and you're like, hey, I'm here for science, exercise, nutrition content, another Fireside Chat, when's the normal programming coming back? That will probably be next week or the week after. As we mentioned on the last episode, we're trying out a new tech setup. If you watch on YouTube, you probably saw we now have a 3-camera setup going. And so, we're doing some Fireside Chats to ensure that we can work out the kinks. The setup process for this week was much smoother than the setup process for last week. And the video quality this week hopefully should be better than the video quality last week. So I think we're pretty close to being able to transition into normal episodes. If something goes disastrously wrong this time, there might be a few more Fireside Chats while we continue to work out the kinks. But assuming everything goes smoothly, the regularly scheduled programming will be returning soon.
Yeah, I have high hopes for this episode. Last episode, what we brought to you, the viewing audience, was a joke. It was a travesty. It was beneath the standards that you've come to expect. And we fired a lot of interns because of that. Yeah. So we really cleaned house, and we expect that this episode is going to be much better, or we're going to have to find an entire additional cohort of interns. So we'll see.
Correct.
But yeah, so moving on, before we get into some of the questions from listeners, there was an image going around on Twitter, and I'm going to link it in the show notes. It is a digital rendering of what Aristotle would have looked like in the flesh. And it's awesome, first of all. But the reason I bring this up is because I saw 3 comments on what Aristotle looks like. Number 1, the unanimous fan favorite was Greg. It turns out that Aristotle and Greg, I wouldn't say that you guys look like twins, but you look like very close brothers.
I had no fewer than 30 people send that to me.
Yeah. So it's a striking resemblance. You have to acknowledge that. Other things that came up, some people said, I love an oddly specific looks like analogy or connection. So someone said it looks like that Aristotle looks like an offensive lineman specifically for Iowa's football team.
Yeah.
And that's actually extremely true.
Yeah, that checks out for sure.
That is perfectly true in an oddly specific way. So yeah, Aristotle does look like an Iowa offensive lineman. He also looks like any Buffalo Bills fan, which I think is also pretty true.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this. Aristotle contributed to many fields of philosophy and is also the chairman of the Bills Mafia.
Yeah. So it did bring up a question that I was curious about. Greg, do you have any celebrities that people often compare you to other than now Aristotle?
Yeah, so I will note, I did not really see the resemblance between me and this this picture that was going around. That could be a trickle-down effect of I don't really know what I look like. I don't look in mirrors, mostly because I'm just not interested. Like, I don't care.
People are going to laugh at you for that, but I actually agree entirely.
Yeah.
And there have been times where I look in the mirror and I'm like, I'll be like, oh, I have something on my face. How long has it been there? I have no idea. I haven't looked at a mirror in 4 days.
So the only time I look in the mirror is if I'm having like a small existential crisis. And it's like, like you're looking yourself in the eyes. And it's like time to buck up.
You actually look in a mirror when you're looking in a mirror, metaphorically?
So, yeah, because
that sounds insane to me, to be honest.
So if I'm like feeling or experiencing things that I'm like unacquainted with, I feel like, if I was if I was trying to get a feel for someone else, I'm going to want to be in the same room with them. I'm going to want to be able to look them in the eyes. Like I think you can pick up on a lot of implicit information from that. And like I don't do that with myself. And so when I feel like, man, some shit's going on, I'm having a hard time processing it. I treat myself the way I would treat another person. Like, I need to look myself in the eyes, like try to get a feel for like what's going on in that person's head that's like looking back at me in the mirror. And I'm like, I don't know. Every time it's weird. I'm like, oh, I look like that. Interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, I didn't think I looked that much like Aristotle. My wife didn't think I looked that much like him. But the celebrity comparison that I have frequently gotten throughout most of my life is Zach Galifianakis, which like I don't really see that one either.
Well, that one's not even close. Like I see the Aristotle, I don't see that one at all.
I kind of think like I also like not just the Aristotle thing. Like if someone with my general body type and a beard ever hits like an impressive lift on Instagram, people will just like tag me in it, be like, oh, at Greg Nuckols, this is you.
Yeah.
And like most of the time there's not even a resemblance.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of folks just assume that somewhat overweight white guys with beards all look the same.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I mean, that would make it much easier for me to get away with crimes. Like there would be so many false leads.
Correct.
But yeah, so Zach Galifianakis is pretty much it for me.
Yeah.
How about you?
There were two that I would get when I was younger. One of them I think is way off base. The other is kind of closer in the ballpark. But I do want to express a caveat on the front end. These are very flattering comparisons, right? So
I think I know why you put this segment in the outline now.
Well, no, these are excessively flattering, but like that's pretty much the nature of celebrity lookalikes. Like a lot of times the celebrities are the beautiful people, and I'm merely one of the common folk. So usually with celebrity comparisons, it's like, of the beautiful people, which one do you have some basic resemblance that is, connected there? So one specific person back in the day used to always tell me I looked like Mark Wahlberg, and I don't think that's accurate whatsoever.
I think that's less physical and more spiritual. Like you give off the same energy as Mark Wahlberg. Like when I see you, I say like he could have stopped that plane from crashing into the second tower.
I have no idea what you're referring to.
I'm pretty sure it was Mark Wahlberg claimed in like 2004 that if he would have been on the plane, he would have stopped 9/11.
Oh God. Yeah, I have no idea. But anyway, I don't see the resemblance.
I'm going to have to fact check myself on that one.
Yeah. But the one that I've gotten before, again, I'm not nearly as attractive as this person and don't claim to be, but I have gotten Matt Damon, which nowadays doesn't seem good because like time has not been kind to me. I don't look the way I looked when I was younger, but when I was younger and had longer hair, I could kind of see the resemblance there. But yeah, that's about as close as anyone's ever gotten with a celebrity lookalike for me. Have you fact checked all your ridiculous claims there?
Yeah, I did. Here's the quote. If I was on that plane with my kids, it wouldn't have went down like it did. There would have been a lot more blood, or there would have been a lot of blood in that first class cabin. And then me saying, quote, okay, we're going to land somewhere safely. Don't worry.
Wow. That is certainly an opinion.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's move on to some listener questions. How do you feel about that?
Let's do it. So
I grouped these in the outline to be kind of themed in little clusters. So this one goes along with the physical appearance theme. Why don't you read it out here?
yeah, so Raja Banerjee says, what are the different facial hair styles you've tried? What was the most ridiculous? And do you have pictures?
So I don't think I have any pictures, but when I was in high school, you know how high school kids are?
Mm-hmm.
They just kind of latch on to trends. And within your high school, within your insular community, there is no alternative, right? It's just everybody agrees, oh, this is a cool thing that we're all doing now. And in my high school, that was extremely thick and long sideburns.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's an interesting question. What if you were not equipped to grow sideburns? Didn't matter. You just did it anyway.
Yeah, just go for it.
Yeah, and so when I was in high school, there was an enormous cohort of young men with these long, wispy sideburns that looked absolutely horrific, truly dreadful. And I was one of those gentlemen. So I don't think I have any pictures, but I tried it, and it was nothing else, just these big, bushy, disgusting, long sideburns, and they were awful. So
that rocks.
I mean, in hindsight, there are worse trends to go along with as a young person, but I mean, there were some folks who just, including myself, who were really not well suited for the look.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you? I feel like this is a question for you because you have essentially the full spectrum of facial hair opportunities accessible to you.
I mean, I think you do too. Like you've got a thick beard. You got to commit.
I got some stuff over here that's not filled in super well, but it's fine.
Growing it longer fixes everything. Like I have a pretty large bald spot like right here, but like it always stays long enough that no one can see it.
Interesting. Well, I had a roommate in college who kind of scarred me. He was a dear friend, but every time I let my beard get a little bit longer, because at that time it was lighter in color. It's gotten darker over the years.
Yeah.
But he would, I would walk into his room and like hang out, and he would just point at the door and say, "Get your gross, fleshy man beard out of my room." Like it was just too blonde looking and fleshy, and it made him physically uncomfortable.
Yeah, you just don't need those negative people in your life.
That's true.
But yeah, so my mustache came in quite a bit later than my beard. And so for a while, and also like I'm very particular. I don't like my mustache touching my lip at all. And so as a confluence of those two factors, for a while, I wasn't rocking the beard and no mustache look, but I was rocking the beard and considerably shorter, considerably thinner mustache look. So it was like a pseudo like Abe Lincoln, pseudo Amish type deal. No. And that did not work for me. I wouldn't be shocked if there are pictures of that somewhere, but I don't have them on my person. And then I tried a lot of just kind of like random things as I was shaving, just like if I had to take it down for whatever reason, just for like a day or two, I would trim it into something else just for the shock value. So, you know, I had the mustache, like, I mean, that's a very tame look. I had the handlebar for a little bit.
Oh, wow.
I had a chin strap for a couple days. Douchiest look ever. Had the goatee look a couple times. But yeah, no, for the most part, my philosophy around having a beard is simply I only have one because it's the lowest upkeep facial hairstyle. You know, I trim my neck maybe like once a week, and I trim the beard maybe like once every 3 or 4 months. And that's it. Like, I don't want to shave every day. I don't want to trim with any like regular frequency. And so like maintaining some other sort of facial hair arrangement would just completely defeat the purpose of having facial hair for me. So yeah, I've done things for just like a day or two at a time, like just as a joke, but never anything like consistent.
Yeah, my beard and mustache get longer exclusively when I've just let myself go.
Yeah,
and I'm not taking care of myself. Last week,
you should grow it out. I think you could rock like a
a
pretty long beard.
I'll think about it. But it was like a couple weeks ago. It had gotten kind of long, and I wasn't taking care of it. And I was drinking from a faulty can, like a can of. I've been drinking a lot of non-alcoholic beer lately. It was very good, but the can was made like something went wrong with the production of this can, and my mustache hair 2 different times got caught in the can.
Oh yeah,
it was obscenely painful.
Yeah.
So I was like, it's definitely time to trim. So yeah, that's just a danger to look out for all the folks out there.
That is completely fair. All right. So I see that we're touching on current events in this episode.
Slightly.
Stephen Mack, one of the Stronger by Science coaches. Stephen's awesome. If you're looking for coaching, hit up our coaching program. If you get paired with Stephen, you're in incredibly good hands. But yeah, so Stephen asks, political takes. What are your thoughts on student loan forgiveness?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of folks in the fitness space commenting on this with a variety of different opinions and perspectives, which is usually we don't put a lot of like directly political stuff into the show. But in this case, I feel like in so many different industries and sectors, people are kind of weighing in. But for those who aren't aware, in the United States, education is prohibitively expensive. And so a lot of folks need to take out pretty considerable loans in order to afford higher education. And recently, the government passed a thing that forgave for a lot of people a portion of their loans and restructured the way that loans were getting paid back and things like that. So my personal perspective, I got really lucky. To be clear, I don't claim to have earned it through force of will and exceptional talent. I got super lucky and was awarded a scholarship that made it such that I could afford college without having to burden myself with enormous amounts of debt. My girlfriend is in a similar situation, but she actually is smart and talented. So mine was mostly luck. I might get into that story later. But she also was in a position due to academic scholarships, did not have to burden herself with these enormous loans. So I have no skin in the game. I have nothing to gain from this policy getting passed. But I'm really stoked about it and fully supportive. I think the way that people have to take on these extremely large loans so early in life, and then they just have to bring them through their young adulthood like this enormous trailer that they're pulling. Mm-hmm. I think the way that the system is currently set up is really predatory. And so I'm really stoked to see that people are getting some relief from that. I would love to see an even more extensive approach to this loan forgiveness that went a little further. But I do think it's important to acknowledge that it is a nice first step. And there are some aspects to this. I haven't looked into it in extreme detail, but from what I've heard about it, I think it's a step in the right direction, which is nice.
I agree. Also, I referred earlier in the episode to podcast lore. Part of the podcast lore is this is, of course, a conservative Christian family values podcast. And as such, I think that, I don't know, maybe we should take a peek at Deuteronomy 15, the concept of the year of Jubilee. I think this is a good first step, but just clear all debts every 7 years. That's what God wanted. I think that's what we should do. But no, serious answer. I'm very much in agreement with you. I also was able to go to undergrad for free. Also from scholarships that I didn't have to do much to acquire. And yeah, so I think that like looking at the trajectory of my life, at graduation, there were a lot of doors open to me that wouldn't have been open if I was in a fair bit of debt. And there were a lot of decisions I made that carried low risk that would have carried considerably more risk if I was in a lot of debt coming out of undergrad. And I maybe this is a wild idea. I just want other people to have access to the same opportunities that I did. And so like I think that, I don't know, like this is maybe like a somewhat spicy take, but from in I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush. Not everyone would fall under this
the number
umbrella.
of caveats that you're piling up here is making me very nervous.
Yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter. But so there is a particular type of person that would and does object to student loan forgiveness, that would also very much say, well, look, we want equality of opportunity, but like the crazy progressives or the crazy leftists, they want equality of outcome, and that's bad. But equality of opportunity, that's good. We should all support that. And like, I don't see how expecting people to either come from means or take on a lot of debt or not attend college, those being the three paths. I don't see how that comports at all with any concept of equality of opportunity.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like again, this could be a wild idea, but I think that, the routes that are available to people when they get out of high school and they're making a decision about, what do I want to do next? Do I want to go to college? Do I want to go to tech school? Do I want to go right into the workforce? Whatever. Like, I think that all of those avenues should be available to people, and there shouldn't be differing amounts, like differing levels of needing to mortgage your future to pursue one of those routes. So yeah, like I think this is a great first step. But I also think that, I don't know, maybe there needs to be some systemic changes so that like college and trade schools are free or effectively free, and far more accessible to people.
Yeah. I agree that it's really important, the point that you made about how different funding opportunities for college impact what you do in those critical years immediately after the undergraduate degree. And, for me, like, would I have felt comfortable wandering into 5 or 6 years of grad school and saying, I don't really know how much money I'll make on the back end, but this stuff seems interesting, I'd like to get in the lab. It's like, well, if you're walking out of your undergrad degree with, this enormous loan, and you're like, well, I need to start paying this thing off immediately. It very much shapes what kind of paths are in front of you as you move forward to that next step. Which is unfortunate that people are so frequently unable to pursue things where they could do things that are really fulfilling and really beneficial to society, because they're stuck saying, well, I need to make money and I need to do it now.
Yeah.
You want to move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's do it.
I have this habit. There's a different podcast called the Stronger by Science podcast that I host, and I have a tendency to grab the steering wheel.
If we stay on this topic, you know what we talk about off mic. If we stay on this topic, I would eventually get myself in a lot of trouble. So we should probably carry on.
Yeah.
Okay, Anthony Pletcher asks, what is the biggest what-if moment in your lives? What small event completely could have changed the trajectory of your life unknowingly?
So for me, the reason I kind of grouped these together in the outline is I alluded to this story in the previous answer. But for me, it wasn't unknowingly. Like, it was a pretty clear, like, major momentous thing that happened in my life. But I mentioned my undergraduate scholarship was, I consider it to be entirely lucky, with maybe just an ounce of strategy behind it. But I was, due to just basic stuff, GPA, standardized test scores, etc., invited out to this competition, and didn't really know what the competition was. Like, I didn't know what was going to be happening. As far as I could tell, it could be a talent show for all I knew. And so I'm thinking probably like a math test and maybe like an English test or something. But they actually just say, like, all right, you have to write 2 essays. Here's a sheet of paper. There's 3 prompts on the front, 3 on the back. Pick one of each and go for it. And I look around the room and I'm like, I am not the smartest person in this room, and I'm not close. Like, I'm not I'm not even near the top of that range. So I basically said, well, I'm not going to outsmart the room and just have the most intelligent essay, but I could write 2 absolutely deranged essays, and the people reviewing them will either think this person is a genius, a creative mastermind, we need a person like this in our school, or they're going to say, oh my God, who submitted this? And I just rolled the dice. I was like, whatever, I'm going to go just kind of off the rails with this thing. And yeah, I went for it. And the people who graded it must have thought it was nice. And like I said, I mean, that little decision of like, should I try to play this straight or just go a completely different direction, ended up, really dramatically shaping what kind of avenues were available ahead of me. And yeah, just completely dumb luck, really.
Do you remember what the prompts were and what your responses to those prompts were?
Yes. So one of them was about like forecasting a type of technology that you think will be really impactful in the future, in the next some amount of time frame. On the other side, it was like I forget. I think it was, if Beethoven was making music today, what kind of music would he make? And so my gamble was that the same person would be assessing both.
Yeah.
And so for one of them, I basically drew up this completely horrific dystopian future that just completely ran amok due to genetic engineering. Like, I just went so off the rails with it.
Yeah.
That I would hope anyone reading it would be severely unsettled, and for the other one, I said, I'm going to make this as frivolous and fun as it can possibly be.
Mm-hmm.
So I weave this narrative of Beethoven essentially playing the role of like a DJ Khaled, and just kind of putting together these mixtapes with just whoever seems to be getting the most clicks at the moment. Who gets a lot of hype on Twitter when they put out a single. And so I just drew together these 2 things. One of them was just the darkest, most dystopian thing. The other, this very light, very fun, adventurous little work of fiction. And I was like, whoever reads this, if they see that both of these came from the same mind, they might just be impressed.
Nice.
And that was it.
Nice. So for me, the biggest what if moment of my life actually happened 2 days ago, as of the time of recording. So I held the door for J. Cole on Wednesday going into the gym. Turns out he goes to the same gym as I do. Pretty cool.
Really?
Yeah, but I didn't say anything. I didn't introduce myself. Figured like he's world famous. Like he's probably not trying to like get recognized and like have people ask for autographs or pictures at the gym. So I was like, you know what? It's fine. Just hold the door for him, not say anything. But, I think, what if I did? And I could have become part of his crew, signed to Dreamville Records, become a world famous rapper. But, like all is not lost. I might have other opportunities. But no, so my actual answer is, so the way my wife and I met was strange. So we were high school sweethearts, and I had plans to go swing dancing with a completely platonic friend. And anyway, like it was with the understanding that like it was just as friends. If anything else came up, totally fine to cancel. So she did get a date lined up for that weekend, so she canceled on me. And like I didn't know Lindsay, like we didn't have any mutual friends, didn't have that many shared interests, but like I thought she was cute. I thought she seemed cool. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take a swing, see how it goes. So I invited her to go swing dancing.
Take a swing, no pun intended.
Yeah, which in hindsight, like that's like a deranged first date for high schoolers. But anyway, she said yes, and it's been great ever since. And like it's it's hard to understate just how positive of a thing that has been for me. She is like, not to be too cheesy, but like she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And not just from like an emotional perspective, but also from like a self-preservation perspective. I think I have a lot of self-destructive tendencies, and she is a great stabilizing force in my life that forces me to be a more normal human, which is very good and healthy for me. So yeah, if I didn't get stood up for swing dancing, who knows what would have happened. But yeah, so that might be a little bit too schmaltzy, but whatever. That's my actual answer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Patrick Douglas says, what is the worst job you've ever had, and what made it the worst? We can reverse order here. I see you have a lot to say.
Yeah.
So so mine is being a YMCA summer camp counselor. And that's for several reasons. One is like, it was a summer job, like between years of school, needed to make money to like save up for the next semester. And it seemed like it was going to be a pretty decent gig. Like the pay wasn't terrible. The hours were supposed to be relatively long and sufficient to make what I needed to. Anyway, we show up on day one. Enrollment in the summer camp was way lower than they thought it would be. So our hours got cut by like 60% on day one.
Hours and therefore wages.
Hours and therefore wages.
Yeah.
And it was also on like a weird schedule. So it wasn't like you always worked morning or always worked afternoon, which really curtailed your ability to find another job. Because it's, you know, like you couldn't say like, here are the hours I'm available. Like it was very touch and go. And so like that was rough, just like purely from just the facts of employment. And then also, man, like kids are exhausting. And it's not necessarily that I dislike kids. They're just a lot. They have so much energy. Like I acclimated to it over the summer, but I have never been more tired than I was after the first week of that job. And like, I mean, I work long hours now, but it's not like as physically taxing for sure. I've also worked very physically taxing jobs, but like a week of looking after 9 and 10-year-olds for even just like 4 or 5 hours a day in the North Carolina sun, I will note that didn't help. Man, I was wore out. And then finally, I was in trouble all the time as an employee because like
your inability to be a good employee is something we've covered before.
Right. So here's the thing. And here's why I'm a bad employee. So I'm interested in getting my job done well, and I feel like I need autonomy to do that. And you know, it's not that I'm unwilling to accept input from authority figures. It's that if I do the things they say and it's a fucking disaster, I'm going to say, no, I'm going to troubleshoot this and find if something works better. And so like in our training, we were trained to basically like be, I think the term was like authoritative figure. So not like authoritarian, but like, I don't remember all of the nomenclature, but and like part of that was like we were essentially supposed to like treat the children as if they were babies. Mm-hmm. And like if I was looking after the 5 and 6 year olds, like maybe that would have flown. But like, yeah, my kids were between 9 and 11. And so that's like an age where people's brains are starting to come online. And so like, you know, the first week I was like, yeah, you know, I'll try to do what I'm supposed to, like interact with them by the book. And like it just wasn't going well because like they were at the age where like they don't want to be treated like babies. I think that caused some amount of resentment. And like my default way of interacting with people is just treating everyone as a peer. And like that's one reason why I'm pretty uncomfortable around small children, because it's like, look, if we can't have a conversation, like you can't speak in complete sentences, and I can tell you don't have like the attention span to really pick up on complex thoughts.
And none of their stories are interesting.
Yeah, they're kids are stupid.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I struggle with that. But, 10, 11 years old, brains are starting to come online. You can start like actually having a conversation. And so like, that's what I did. And it worked a lot better. Like if someone was acting up, I'd be like, hey man, like let's talk about this. Like I understand you got some energy you need to let out, but just keep in mind what's going on here. Like there's one of me, 20 of y'all. Like we gotta figure out a way to do this that's gonna work for everyone. And like they were very receptive to that, and things were going pretty well. But every time one of my supervisors would observe what I was doing, like they would call me in and be like, that's wrong. You're doing it wrong. But also, again, on the topic of being a bad employee, the hours were shit. The pay wasn't that good. And it wasn't like the most in demand job. So like, I basically called their bluff. I was like, are you going to fire me? And they're like, no, like we need you to keep doing this, but like just try to do it this other way. But like the only thing I processed is, okay, I'm not going to get fired. Yeah. Therefore, I'm just going to keep doing this. So overall, I got along great with my kids, and like that part of the job was good. But I was in constant conflict with my supervisors. But again, like they were in a position where they couldn't fire me. So yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, for me, I want to be careful about how I frame this, because I don't want to do a like complainy kind of segment. But I would say that, like, objectively speaking, if you think about what are the characteristics that make a good job and what are the characteristics that make an unfavorable or a bad job, I would have to say that being a grad student was the worst job I ever had, just objectively going by the characteristics. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways that I work through that, and like I would go back and do it again because it's a stepping stone. It's a thing you do to get to the job you want to do. Mm-hmm. But I do find it very funny that a lot of advisors and a lot of faculty members say, well, you should treat being a grad student like a job. And I'm like, I think that's bad advice, because if you were to write out this job description, right? The job description is, by the time you get to the end of your PhD, you're still a grad student, right? Mm-hmm. So at some time in your trajectory, your job description is, I need you to have a master's degree and then 2 to 4 years of extra training beyond that, right? And if you're doing human research, in many cases, you are perpetually on call. Mornings, nights, weekends, whatever. Someone didn't come in for their visit Friday, guess what? Your Saturday plans are canceled because you need to get them in because it had to be 48 to 72 hours in the protocol, right? Yeah. So like you are perpetually on call. A typical work week between your coursework, your teaching, your grading, your research, your writing, very often in excess of 70 hours. And the pay level, no matter where you're living in the United States, is almost always below $30,000 a year. Mm-hmm. If you put that stuff if you just put that out on a flyer and said, hey, go ahead and call this number for this job, no one is making that call. Yeah. So like the classic advice is, hey, treat it like a job. But I think that advice is like, well, maybe it'd be cool if we did that globally. So maybe if not just the grad student treated it like a job, but also the university said, oh, we're going to treat this like a job, which means like we're going to make these expectations more compatible with what an actual job is like, so like there are some places in the world that I hear that, as you get further along in that process, the gig starts getting a little bit better as you go. But yeah, that's one of the things that was always, one of the things like it's easy to say from the outside, but like if someone made me, a high powered administrator in a university, one of the things that I think the American university system could collectively really improve is just how we structure the graduate student setup and how we calibrate their salary expectations and things like that. Their compensation, I should say, But yeah, on paper, it's a pretty crappy job. And I think it gets more obvious toward the end, because when you're toward the end of a PhD, they're like, hey, you're going to teach this 300 level class. And it's also a class that some of our faculty members teach. And so you're literally doing the same job.
Yeah.
And there's no additional guardrails that are provided for you versus them. You're doing all the same grading. You're teaching the same content. And their salary is usually 4 or 5 times higher than yours for literally the same thing that you're doing. And at that point, most of your research you're doing pretty independently, just like they are. And so, yeah, toward the end of the gig, you start to say, like, I really need to get out of here.
Yeah.
So I don't, like I said, I don't want to be too complainy, because like I have no complaints. I was a grad student for a while, had a lot of opportunities put on a platter right in front of me. I got very lucky in that regard. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm out over here complaining, but objectively speaking, you do get to a point toward the end where you're like, I need to move on to something else immediately.
Nice.
But yeah, an underrated job, if you're like, like when I was in high school, I had some crappy high school jobs that I hated. Food service was pretty tough. Dude, janitor at a gym was the best high school and college gig you could ever get. I mean, I was just up there mopping away on the gym floor and just chatting with everybody. Hey, how's your bench press going? Hey, did you get that deadlift the other day? Like, it was the best, man.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Michael Taylor asks, how about some more conversation around under the radar music that you're listening to? I will once again go first because your list is quite a bit longer than mine. I don't really seek out much new music, and most of the stuff I listen to is like the stuff I listened to in high school. It was good then. It hasn't gotten worse over time. And discovering new music is a time investment. And I don't know. I just don't try to fix what isn't broken. That's kind of how I approach it. But I will say she's not super under the radar, but I don't think she's super mainstream yet. I have been listening to some Remy Wolf recently. I saw her open for Lorde a couple months back. She was very good, brought excellent energy to her live show, and said, you know what, I'm going to check her out on Spotify. So I did, and it's enjoyable music. So that would be my recommendation.
Good stuff. I'm going to go through this really quickly here, but first, a disclaimer. By definition, I do not have under the radar music because I do not have an ear to the ground. I am not part of the underground music scene. So anything that has gotten to me by default is not actually under the radar. So what I wanted to do here as a true empiricist is I just went through one of the playlists I've been listening to a lot lately, one that I made myself. And I was like, oh, what are some bands on here that you don't hear about much these days in out in the wild as people are discussing music. So just running through some names. Yeasayer, excellent band. Saw them at Lollapalooza and they were incredible. Kurt Vile, same deal. Saw him at Lollapalooza. He was great. A band called Real Estate. LCD Sound System, which I don't believe they make music anymore, unless I'm mistaken. But back in the day, they were pretty solid. Grizzly Bear, Deer Hunter, Pavement, Local Natives. That's one that a lot of folks haven't heard of, but they're pretty solid. Mac DeMarco is getting really big in the like indie music world now. So and someone is going to just roast me for including him on an under the radar list.
If it makes you feel better, I've never heard of him. So
oh well,
he's under my radar.
Okay,
he's under at least one radar.
Yeah, but Mac DeMarco, I like his stuff a lot. A few bands that are not under the radar, but they were on the playlist, so I'll throw them in there. The Strokes, I love the Strokes. Interpol had some really solid albums. There's a artist who goes by the name Vetiver, who's quite good. And then one that's just a complete curveball, total change of genre. But have you heard any music from Silk Sonic?
I'm sure I have. I think Lindsay has some of them on her playlist, but yeah. I haven't sat down and like chewed on their music.
Yeah, well, they're great. It's a collaboration between Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak, and it's in terms of genre, just a complete 180 compared to everything else on the list. But yeah, they've got some really nice stuff.
All right, moving on.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Sean Sutherland asks, what are your favorite 5 movies of all time? With a parenthetical, assuming Eric has seen at least 5 movies, lol.
Yeah, so I can't really do a top 5 movie list. I think it would be inappropriate due to insufficient sample size, as the question gets at. I can't offer an informed opinion on that, but I will say this. I was in a room hanging out, and my brother was like, hey, do you want to watch a movie? And I said, absolutely not. He said, well, let me rephrase that. I'm going to watch a movie. You can do whatever you want. And he put on 2001: A Space Odyssey, and the opening scene drew me in like the most powerful magnet on the planet. I was blown away. And like
with the monkeys looking at the pillar.
It was, yeah, there's just this entire sequence at the beginning. It starts with that, and then it gets into this very ominous conversation, and you can't tell exactly what they're talking about, but you know you want to know.
Yeah.
Right? And so it was very nuanced, subtle filmmaking, storytelling that drew you in without like, you know, hitting you over the head with any really explicit details. But yeah, that movie drew me in and was a wild ride. So that has to be on the list if I were to make one. But instead of movies, I'm going to give my top 5 television series, just based on how I'm feeling lately. Breaking Bad was excellent. It was a classic. Peaky Blinders, I very, very much enjoyed. Seinfeld is a classic. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is, in my opinion, kind of the modern Seinfeld. There's some pretty clear parallels there. But my favorite universe of content is called On Cinema at the Cinema. And it's Greg Turkington and Tim Heidecker. And it's really difficult to explain. It started out as like a YouTube movie review show that they would do in character. The movie reviews were terrible, but they were developing this kind of universe behind it that branched out into so many different things. And I don't even know where to begin in trying to disentangle how that universe came together. But I mean, they've had television shows, a YouTube series, podcast, like it's a whole thing at this point. And it's just a very, like the term that a lot of people would use is anti-comedy for kind of the way they approach it. Although I know Tim Heidecker, at least from interviews I've seen, takes issue with that because he's like, it's either funny or not. And if it's funny, it's comedy. Yeah. Right. But it's a very unique kind of niche approach to comedy that if 100 people listening to this check it out, 97 will be like, Eric, I don't get it. Why are you doing this? And the other 3 will watch it for the rest of their life and buy a t-shirt.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So for me, I did actually answer the question that was asked.
That sounds like a dig at me.
Well, it said 5 movies and you only gave 1. I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
If you like 2001, have you checked out any of Kubrick's other stuff?
No, because an irrational thing about me that I will always defend is I refuse to spend 2 hours initiating the process of watching a movie. I refuse to sign up for that commitment. But if you play 4 30-minute television shows, I'll watch all 4 of them. No problem. That
is completely fair. The one thing I will say is that if you like 2001 but don't like many other movies, there might be some other stuff in the Kubrick canon you like, because they all have a very particular feel that's pretty unique to Kubrick stuff.
Yeah.
In that you, like, no matter how good the actors are and what they're trying to emote on screen, there's a deep sense you get that everyone involved in the project is miserable.
Yeah.
Because they are.
Yeah.
Because apparently it was hell to work for Kubrick. he would make people like just do the same scene like 200 times in a row. Yeah, so I think with Kubrick, like you either love him or you hate him.
Yeah.
But if you like one of his movies, you'll probably like more.
So he's trying to get misery out of the actor, and he says, "Well, we don't need to act. I'll just make you miserable. Yeah,
exactly.
I'll just create it."
Yeah, like no matter what, if you were in a Kubrick film, you were a method actor.
Yeah,
and you were embodying the role of a miserable actor.
Yeah, we'll call it a practical effect.
Correct.
I will just make you extremely miserable.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect.
But yeah, so my list is and this isn't necessarily in order, but these are my top 5. Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, Director's Edition. Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Director's Edition. Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, Director's Edition once again. And then for the final 2, and to be clear, like I think that the Lord of the Rings trilogy is maybe one of the greatest masterpieces ever put to film. So my next one I've mentioned on the podcast before, and this could just be recency bias, but I really, really liked Everything Everywhere All at Once, and it might be in my top 5. It was I found it spectacular. And then for the 5th spot, it's hard to narrow it down to just one, but I'm gonna say Spirited Away, or really just about anything by Hayao Miyazaki. I think of his movies, I think Spirited Away is my favorite, but there's just a time where you have an itch. You have a Miyazaki itch that only Miyazaki can scratch. His movies just have such like a great ambiance and vibe that's fairly unique to him and is just incredibly pleasant.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to move on to some Reddit questions? I feel like we've been going kind of long.
It's up to you. You're the host. I'm just here for fun.
All right. Okay. We can save these for just like another fireside chat at some point. I think we have like another whole episode's worth of questions picked out.
Yeah.
But I do want to go for 2 Reddit questions, I would say, so as to not neglect that community. Yeah, let's go for some random ones. So, Ulrich asks, you're being sent back to Florence, Italy in the year 1000 CE, leaving in 12 hours. You will be provided travel clothing, basic camping gear, and an empty medium backpack. You don't know if you'll ever return to this time. You'll get military vaccines, but once you arrive, you're on your own. You can bring one item with you as long as it fits in the backpack. You can bring multiple of the item as long as everything fits in the backpack. Your mission is to accelerate human civilization. What do you bring?
I have to go after you because
okay.
My answer is basically just building upon yours.
Yeah.
Because I think you got the correct answer.
Yeah, so I think the obvious answer is just a physics textbook and be discerning about it. Like try to find ones that include like relatively detailed descriptions of how the early experiments were done and how the early discoveries were made. Because like, you know, shit like electromagnetism, like you could give someone from 1000 CE like the equations, and they'll be like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And like I don't know how they initially discovered that, but like a good physics textbook that takes you through both like the implications of how to work with these forces, but also just like how they could go about independently like verifying them. I think that's probably the play. And then you couldn't take these in a backpack, but just in terms of things I would try to teach them, I would try to teach them about crop rotation, because Europeans specifically were really late to the game on crop rotation. Like when people talk about the Dark Ages, they're like, like nothing really happened. Things were great in the Roman Empire, and then like all technological progress stopped. Like that's not true. And if anything, like one of the most important technological breakthroughs made was crop rotation during the Middle Ages. And that's like one of the things that allowed populations to start exploding, just because like before that, people would just plant fields every year, eventually just run them out of nutrients, and then just kind of starve. So teach them about crop rotation and teach them about germ theory of disease. That seems like a pretty big one. And I do know how Pasteur demonstrated that, so I could walk them through it as long as they had like reasonable quality glassware.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that you are largely correct in terms of what you're trying to achieve there, but one thing I'll point out, it says you can bring one item with you. It leaves some room for interpretation there. I believe you could create the item, in my opinion. And so what I would do is take kind of like a scrapbook approach to the materials that I'm putting in my backpack. So I think you hit the nail on the head, because the goal here is to accelerate human civilization, right? So physics textbook, very big, crop rotation, germ theory. What I would try to do is put together a little binder. So like, hey, here's like kind of a crash course in what you can expect over the next, 1,000 years or so. So I try to throw in some stuff about how vaccines work, maybe drop a little hint about antibiotics in there. Electric light seems important, but probably one of the single thing that I think would, kind of achieve that goal of accelerating human civilization, I'd say, hey, printing press is coming along in several hundred years, but like you might want to get a head start on that. Mm-hmm. So I would try to prioritize the printing press and say, hey, you want to do this. This will be nice.
That's smart.
Yeah.
All right. Let's end on the trolley problem.
Oh God.
So what you expect said, I'm going to be boring and just invoke the trolley problem. It's been overdone to death, but usually has generated at least some authentic ideas each time I've heard it discussed through various media. And then Dark Autumn adds that one of like the classic versions of the trolley problem is like, okay, like maybe you're willing to pull the lever, but what if instead of pulling the lever, you had to physically push someone onto the tracks to stop the trolley, still killing one, saving 5? Would you do it? Many people say they wouldn't, but apparently one of the groups that pretty consistently, or two of the groups that pretty consistently say they would, I haven't checked the sources on this. I'm going to assume that this user, Dark Autumn, isn't lying to us. But apparently two of the groups that would push the person onto the tracks are psychopaths and Buddhist monks. So they were particularly interested in how Eric would respond to that and just the trolley problem in general. So that's kind of a peek ahead, but let's just start with the basics. So I'm sure most listeners here are aware of the trolley problem, but if not, here the most basic setup is that a trolley's coming down the tracks. There's 5 people tied to the tracks. There's no way you can get there to untie them and save them. Either the trolley is going to run them over, or you can pull a lever, divert the trolley to another set of tracks. There's one person tied up to that set of tracks. You also can't do anything to save them. They're not going to get away. So basically, do you allow the trolley to keep just going straight, not take action, and allow 5 people to die? Or do you pull the lever, divert it to the other tracks, and allow one person to die? But, how much do you value like bad things happening due to your inaction versus bad things happening due to like an active action that you take? So
yeah,
Eric, do you pull the lever?
So I do, and I have many times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to me it comes back to my my old teaching that I was doing. So back in when I was teaching a sports medicine class at the university level, we would have to talk a little bit about legal ramifications of failing to complete your task in the sports medicine field with a satisfactory level of competence, right? So we would talk about lawsuits related to negligence. And, you can look at acts of omission, which is, failing to do what you have a duty to do. I'm paraphrasing here off memory. And then acts of commission, where you do a bad thing. And it's like, dude, you should not have done that. But both of those things are routes to negligence and harm, right? And so I think this really gets at the idea of, are you so averse to an act of commission, pulling the lever and doing a thing that causes a death, you're kind of, I guess, balancing like, the guilt that comes with an act of commission, of doing that thing, versus the fact that by doing that, you can no longer claim to just be hands off and say, well, it was an act of omission.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, we're talking about one life being lost or five, right? So
Yeah.
I think I would pull the lever, because I think the distinction between one life and 5 lives is much more impactful than the distinction between an act of omission and an act of commission.
Yeah, I fully agree. I pull the lever, and I mean, who knows how I would respond if I was actually in that situation. But in terms of just here in this room, just talking about it theoretically, I pull the lever, and I don't have to think too hard about it.
So my excuse is that I'm a Buddhist. What's your excuse? That you're a psychopath?
I don't think I have like a super consistent. Well, so that's the next iteration of this problem.
Oh, okay.
But in terms of just in general how I look at this, I don't think I have a super consistent set of ethical principles. But I do think if I have kind of like a default mode of how I operate, I think I have like some core principles that kind of like transcend general ethical decision making to me. So like one of those is loyalty. Like if you're one of my people, like I've got your back almost no matter what. So like they're kind of like those big overriding principles, kind of like that. But then when it comes down to like kind of more day-to-day ethical decision making, I'm pretty utilitarian. Like that's kind of the way I lean. So most of the time I pull the lever for most iterations of the trolley problem. All right, so now let's get into the one that Dark Autumn asked about in particular. So now instead of just the train barreling down the tracks and you can pull a lever to divert it, you can either just let it keep rolling. There's no lever to pull. There's no second set of tracks, but you're standing on a bridge and there's another person standing on the bridge, and you can push them in front of the trolley and that will stop it. And this is a philosophical question. So like you can't say, oh, well, it wouldn't actually stop the trolley. Like you know with perfect knowledge that pushing this person in front of the trolley will stop the trolley. But now you're actually shoving a person instead of pulling a lever. Do you do that one?
I think, again, it's easy to do like a little thought experiment like this and answer a certain way. Whether or not you would actually do it in the moment when the adrenaline's rushing is very different. I think it would be harder in that situation, but when you're discussing it as a hypothetical, I would still say, yeah, I mean, that it again is, an act of commission rather than omission, but one that ultimately saves a net of 4 lives. So I don't think that the concept of, a push being a much more terrible act than a lever pull, I don't think that really changes the calculus that much to me. Like I know that we have the kind of built-in mental concept that like, yeah, pushing someone is a not nice thing and is a more aggressive action than pulling a lever. But I really don't think that logically it changes the calculus that much.
Okay. So I agree. So I guess that makes you the Buddhist and me the psychopath.
Yeah, I think so.
That scans, whatever. Okay, so those are the two in particular we were asked about. There are many other iterations. Do you have an iteration of the trolley problem that you would like to throw at me?
No, I'd never heard of the trolley problem until I saw it in the outline.
Really?
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
Oh, shit. Okay, let's have some fun then.
Okay.
All right, so now, the original version of the trolley problem, 5-1, pull the lever, kill 1, save 5. But the person on the tracks is, say, like either like your girlfriend or a parent, best friend, close family member, something like that.
I hate where this is going.
Do you pull the lever then?
Oh, man. You know what? I did look at the link that was talking about how the Buddhist monks answered to this, and I'll probably get kicked out of my sangha for this, but man, like you said, loyalty really starts to mess around with your like set of ethical kind of things, you know, like it'd be really hard, right? So like if someone you care about is on that other area of the tracks and you're pulling the lever to divert the train or the trolley toward them, I don't think I could do it if I'm being honest with myself. And I know that the monk said that that's a selfish approach and one that's not supported by them.
Yeah, that's fair. So I also don't pull the lever. And as someone with vaguely utilitarian leanings, I actually think you can make a utilitarian argument for that. So, you know, the idea of like maximizing like net happiness, minimizing net suffering. I think that sometimes in like a utilitarian calculus, and I'll readily admit that this sort of thinking kind of opens the door for people justifying just about anything they want to.
Yeah.
But I do think you need to consider kind of like second and third order effects. And I kind of think that like one of the core tenets of having like a functioning society is you need some amount of trust. And a lot of trust is built on like familiarity, basically. Like you have to have like a general understanding that like you look out for your family, you look out for your friends, and like there are relationships that matter to you. And so I guess this is almost like viewing a utilitarian decision through like a deontological lens. But I sort of think that like if people were to generalize that, and it's like, okay, well, what if people did just start pulling the lever in that situation, and like
as like a default setting where everyone's like, oh, of course we all pull the lever,
right?
Yeah.
And like you would therefore have much less trust that the people who you care about and who you think care about you would have your back in a sticky situation.
Yeah,
I think the knock-on effects of that would be disastrous. So
yeah, that's a good point.
In that situation, I would not pull the lever.
Anything to confirm my biases and make me feel less selfish for my previous answer, I'm fully in support of.
Cool.
Yeah. No, I'd never heard of these. I've heard of like iterations of them in hindsight, but I'd never like heard of them categorized as like the trolley problem or this like kind of. I didn't know it was a thing.
Yeah.
I just thought it was a random collection of thought experiments that I've encountered.
Well, let's keep rolling. Let's do.
Oh God, I hate this.
Let's do like 2 or 3 more, because those are the 3 classic trolley problems.
Okay.
So let's see. So this is also a classic iteration, and is one that is probably more likely than the ones we've done so far to at least make some people upset. All right. So now it's not 5 and 1; it's 1 and 1. The train is barreling down the tracks, and it's going to hit a person who, you know, you don't know anything about them, but they appear to be, say, below 30 years old. Or you can pull the lever and it'll divert it to a track where you don't know anything about the other person, but they appear to be maybe like 80 years old.
Oh God.
Do you pull the lever?
I don't know. I can't think of a good way to answer that. I hate these. I don't like them at all. What do you do?
I mean, so I also don't feel good about this, but I don't think, and someone could persuade me otherwise about this, but I don't think that I view acts of commission and acts of omission differently. Like I do think that they carry the same moral heft.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you get out of it by not pulling the lever.
Right.
And I do think that I do think that just in general, the potential for continued life has to be valued to some extent.
Yeah.
And so I would say, like, just in terms of like who deserves like moral consideration, I don't think that like age impacts someone's like inherent worth. But I do think that if you're in a situation where like one has to die, I feel like you got to pull the lever there. And I also think that's basically how the medical system works, like a triage system.
Yeah.
Like you know, with finite resources, if you've got to let someone die, you start with people who have the lowest chances of survival.
Right.
And then if it's people who seem to have similar chances of survival, you tend to just favor the younger folks because they have more life left to live.
Yeah.
So I feel like I would have to go that route, but that's the first iteration of kind of like the classic trolley problems that does make me incredibly uneasy.
It does make me uneasy. I guess you could kind of frame it as like, okay, let's say that we have a total of 100 person years to allocate between the two.
Yeah.
Does it seem more fair that we say, okay, well, you get to live 20 and you get to live 80, or to say, okay, you both get 50 years, you know, you both get a crack at it, right? So I guess with it's the same kind of deal where it's like, well, you've already, the older person has already had ample opportunity to experience all the joys of life, and has a more limited, one would assume, remaining years of life. So, I hate these. Are you sure we have to do 2 or 3 more?
We're gonna do one more.
Okay, one more is fine.
We're gonna do one. So
here's the thing.
I know some very devious iterations of the trolley problem. I'm taking you through the 5, I would say, most classical versions.
Okay, because one thing that, as I've gotten more and more into Buddhism, I've thought more about how I tend the garden that is my mind, and whether or not I wish to burden it with hypotheticals that are anxiety-inducing or treacherous or depressing. Like, I really do cultivate very carefully the ideas that are rattling around in my brain. So the idea of willingly subjecting myself to these awful choices.
Apparently a bunch of Buddhist monks did.
Yeah.
For the article that Dark Autumn linked.
I'm not quite a monk yet.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe they're just more robust and resilient. They've got better training for navigating these waters.
All right. So here's the last one.
Okay.
Actually, we'll do 2 more.
Okay.
And then we'll be done. Okay.
All right.
So this one, still 5-1. It's the classic trolley problem, but the one person, not someone you love, but it's someone who, is considered like a great person who did important things. So, imagine it's, say, Albert Einstein, and with like perfect philosophical knowledge that he will like discover and publish general relativity and special relativity, but like he hasn't yet. You're a time traveler in this scenario.
Yeah.
You know what he would go on to do if he survived. But it's 5 versus 1. Do you let the trolley hit the 5, or do you pull the lever and kill Einstein?
If it's like the type of thing that like it is a major paradigm shifter that alters the trajectory of human existence, I would say you'd have to say, we don't get many chances at that. That would be my answer.
That's interesting. I think this is the first one that we pretty strongly disagree on.
Well, because I'm trying to think of, maximizing the positive benefit of whatever that individual. So, like, for example, if it's a person who discovers some kind of medical intervention that saves 400,000 lives, you know what I mean? That's where my mind goes. Not just like some kind of trivial. I made a little novel discovery, but I'm thinking more if I know that them.
Yeah, let's say it's what's his name? Edward Jenner, smallpox vaccine guy. I think.
Yeah. So like, if I know that I can save this one life because what they're gonna do is gonna result in tens or hundreds of thousands of lives saved because of what they're on the cusp of achieving, then yeah, I think I would weigh that into the calculus pretty heavily. But it sounds like you feel differently.
Yeah. No. I pull that lever just as quickly as I pull the lever in the first canonical scenario.
Yeah.
because I fundamentally don't believe in the great man theory of history. I think that there are a ton of very smart and capable people, and that for most discoveries and breakthroughs that are made, like the person that gets there first is really just like the person who got lucky, and that if they didn't do it, someone else probably would have made like an identical discovery and like still done the same stuff within like a decade of when it initially happened. Because like the way like ideas form, very rarely do you have someone who's just like so transcendently brilliant that they're jumping like multiple leaps ahead. It's basically like there are ideas floating around like in the general consciousness of society or a particular field, and like the breakthrough is just like you're the one that figures out like the two ideas that fit together, or like the way to just barely extend an extant idea to make it something like really cool and impactful. So yeah, like I think Einstein, for example, was a brilliant physicist, but I think that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of brilliant physicists at the time, and if he didn't pull off general relativity, like someone else would have within like 3 years or something. So yeah, I think that I pull the lever there.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to be a time traveler who's next to somebody's deathbed and saying, "I have great news. Someone's going to cure this in 30 years."
Yeah. Well, but the thing is, like, I really don't think it's like 30 years.
Yeah. I guess the question is, in this hypothetical, how many people are dying and at what rate? You know, because even a 10-year delay leaves a lot of people hanging for 10 years.
Yeah, that's fair, but I also think that this kind of harkens back to what we were talking about with, like, for a family member or close friend. Like, I think that if you start making that calculus, you start kind of signing up for a fundamentally elitist society where you are willing to assent that people who have been particularly successful have inherently more valuable lives than other people, and I'm not comfortable with that at all.
Well, no, so because what I'm saying is the value of the 10,000 saved, not the one saved, because this is a very special person, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Are you sure that's not the last one? Because I genuinely hate this. You are right now the Stanley Kubrick of podcasters.
This is the last one.
Okay.
I promise you.
Okay.
So, all right. So your trolley's barreling down the track at five people. You pull the lever. It's going to divert it to a track with one person, and that lever pull will divert the trolley onto a track that works perfectly, and that one person will die. There are 5 people on the other track, but the track's poorly maintained. It's a little rickety. In fact, it's very rickety, and there's an 80% chance that the trolley will actually just run off the tracks, and everyone survives. Do you pull the lever?
So pulling the lever puts it onto the one where there's a 20% chance or an 80% chance.
Pulling the lever puts it onto a track, 100% chance one person dies.
Okay.
If it keeps going, there is a 20% chance that 5 people die and an 80% chance that no one dies.
Yeah, I would not pull the lever.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say let's see if the numbers work out, you know, and hope for the best.
Yeah.
So I feel like you at least open up the chance of a really successful outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. So this one I think is the least ethically fraught. This more just gets to like how you think about probability.
Yeah.
Because, you know, on net, if you ran this experiment 10,000 times, the same number of people die no matter which way you choose. Like it works out. So, it's basically, are you willing to risk it to get the biscuit?
Yeah.
But yeah, once it goes from being a 100% proposition to a probability game where maybe 5 people die, but on average, if it's done enough times, it balances out. I go for the option where there is at least a probability that no one dies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of at least having the possibility open,
All right. We're done with trolley problems.
Thank God.
You can breathe easy now.
I hate those because it just is completely antithetical to everything about the way I like my brain to work.
Yeah, that's completely fair.
I do have one thing I wanted to address before we wrap up. Was that going to be the last question?
I think so. We've been running pretty long. It's like 5:45.
Okay, yeah. I told someone on Instagram that I would answer their question, and so I have to answer it because I put a time on it.
Okay.
An Instagram user, getting back to stuff that makes me feel good instead of bad. An Instagram user asked if I could reshare my experience about getting into Buddhism, like what the motivation was, how it was going. I don't want to harp on it too much, as you know, I quickly scampered away from the Road to Enlightenment segment. But since it's a Fireside Chat and it's literally the only thing I do outside of fitness stuff, it comes up from time to time. And I haven't really addressed it in a lot of detail from start to finish. I'm not going to have like a long answer, but just wanted to answer this question for people who are tagging along and like, what the hell's going on here? So I got interested in Buddhism really at the beginning of COVID. Because I mean, you've known me for several years and I never even hinted at an interest prior to that. But what I noticed with COVID, like immediately there were all the lockdowns, which I supported. I understood the necessity and thought they were the right thing to do at the time. But being on board with it is not synonymous with enjoying it. And I noticed that even for someone like me who didn't go out and do a lot, I noticed that when like the gym is closed and all the restaurants are closed, the things I would typically do to busy my mind and find some joy, when those were closed, my ability to independently generate joy and contentment was really dramatically impaired. And so it kind of made me realize that my ability to obtain joy was really contingent upon a lot of external conditions. And I was like, that doesn't seem like a good path. Like I'd like to be able to access that joy and general contentedness by my own making rather than relying on a bunch of factors outside my control. So that's what kind of spurred me and got me into it. But I was cleaning out my house the other day. Someone asked if we journal, and I don't journal anymore, but there was a time where I was so miserable that I started journaling a lot, which I don't understand why. It was like, I need contemporaneous notes of how freaking miserable I am right now. I don't know why that seemed intuitive.
I will say that seems pretty generalizable. Like, yeah, that and like,
it's like, I need to prove to someone in 10 years how miserable I am.
Well, I think that there's and this doesn't always track, but there's a list of things that like people will recommend for like, like self-care, how to feel better, whatnot. And like journaling's one of them.
Yeah.
Like taking mental health days is another one. And like all of these things that are like supposed to help you feel good. But then I kind of noticed that if someone's doing multiple of those things, it's like, I don't think you're feeling that good right now.
Yeah. So what was really funny was I was cleaning out my house, and I found this old journal.
Which, I mean, I'll note that checks out. Like people have a problem, they're taking steps to remedy it. I certainly don't begrudge that, but
yeah.
It
is interesting though, because it allows you an opportunity. It's almost like doing mindfulness without calling it mindfulness, because it kind of instructs you to decenter yourself a little bit and explore things, and in this case just kind of jot them down, right, instead of meditating on them or something. But it was really funny because I was looking through this journal and like I was like, this is gonna be so cringy, but I have to open it and just go back to it. And what's so incredible is like this was years before I even got into this kind of stuff, but it was so obvious that it was exactly what I needed. Like I was going through and it's like, oh, today I'm journaling about how I'm not managing my strong negative emotions very well, or I'm not managing my anxiety about the future very well, or my regret about the past very well, or I'm always striving and task oriented and I can't really enjoy the present moment. I'm always chasing the next goal with so much ambition that I'm ignoring the present moment, really failing to just experience the present moment and access joy. I'm looking through the pages and it was so painful in retrospect because I was like, dude, you were so close. You named every problem that you had and not a single viable solution. So in that case, the journaling at the time wasn't a particularly constructive practice because I was just documenting misery and never exploring any remedy for that, aside from just like, here's a list of miseries that I've compiled. But yeah, so it's really clear to me that even going back before COVID, it was something that probably would have benefited me very much. Because when you get into it, you notice that it does address a lot of those topics very explicitly and very head on, you know, managing emotions well, managing stress and anxiety, things like that. So, and like one of the really key ideas in Buddhism is that of aimlessness, that, you know, you don't always have to be super ambitiously striving for the next goal. It's okay to just kind of be there and experience life. And I grew up in the Midwest, man. Ambition is the only virtue, like growing up in the Midwest. I'm sure that's true many places, but like the American Midwest is like, there are the hyper ambitious folks to whom aimlessness sounds like a grave sin. And then there's the people who lacked ambition, which like in that cultural environment is like the worst thing you could be. Someone without ambition.
And they become the cautionary tale for everyone else. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, it was just getting into these ideas was a complete, I had to completely revisit and in some cases restructure the way that I viewed certain perspectives and mindsets. But anyway, yeah, it was really funny to take that trip down memory lane, and COVID was what nudged me over the edge to actually start pursuing these ideas. But it was always there even years before where I'm like, that could have been helpful. But someone asked about how I got into it and like the content I started with. I listened to Buddhism Guide, which is a podcast by Karma Yeshe Rabgye, which was really, really nice. I really liked that. Then I started reading his books, and then I read all of his books, and I said, well, what are more books? And then I got into Thich Nhat Hanh's books, and his particular tradition of Buddhism really, really resonated with me. Like I love Yeshe's stuff. It was really, really helpful to me, and I still think it's great. But Thich Nhat Hanh's stuff resonated with me at just a completely different way. So I ended up joining a Sangha that's a couple blocks over that practices in the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, which is really cool. And I still listen to a lot of stuff. I listen to a podcast called Audio Dharma, which is a collection of lectures that are really, really good. And so yeah, if you're interested in just kind of tiptoeing into some of these topics and exploring what they're all about, those are the resources that I would highly recommend. And you know, if I were to go back and I really, you know, all of these different sources really have helped me solidify things in different ways. But if someone was to say, I'm just starting out, I need something that's very approachable and accessible, something that doesn't insist that I immediately jump on board with anything that is too different from the ideas I were brought up with, I would say start with some of Thich Nhat Hanh's books, and they're really, really nice, and they're very non-judgmental. They meet you where you are, and you can kind of pick and choose which elements are most helpful to you.
Sweet.
All right, that's all I got.
All right, so that does it for this episode of the Stronger by Science Fireside Chat series. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you want to help us out, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like it. Drop a comment in. I hear that helps the algorithm. Leave us a nice review if you're listening to this on any sort of podcast platform. If you have a negative review, the email address to send that to is eric@strongerbyscience.com to get a long, very personal response to your thoughtful criticisms. And yeah, we'll see you almost assuredly in a week. If not in a week, then in 2.
Here's a quick over-under before we close out. How many people do you think are going to comment speculating on whether or not Eric was obscenely uncomfortable during the trolley problem or the greatest actor of our generation?
I think you were palpably uncomfortable.
That was one of those times where I was like, you know what? There is no hiding when you have a 3-camera system.
Yeah,
people are going to watch me crawling out of my skin on YouTube.
I actually think we need a 4-camera system because your giveaway nervous tick is when your leg starts fidgeting at that particular rate, because you do fidget.
Yeah,
but it's like it's generally like a metronomic fidget.
Yeah.
But when it accelerates and becomes syncopated, like the difference between like normal snoring and like sleep apnea snoring, like there's a qualitative difference. We need a leg cam, and then people will be able to tell.
We could just so when I was working on my PhD, I did a lot of cardiometabolic assessments in real time. So we would have screens going where we would have an EKG continuously, and sometimes continuous blood pressure monitoring. We could just do that. So if we really want to help people see my discomfort and stay on brand with Stronger by Science, we can get a 4th camera feed that's just a screenshot, like a screen capture of just my real time blood pressure and heart rate.
We could we could get like the little finger sensors that they use for like lie detector tests that don't really tell if you're lying, but tell if you're nervous, because it's looking at like skin reactants. That would be cool.
Yeah. So anyway, a little aside, but we will be back most likely in 7 days. So thanks for joining us. Thank you for listening to the Stronger by Science podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to sign up for our free newsletter to get concise breakdowns of relevant research, as well as 28 free training programs for all skill levels and all schedules. We hate spam just as much as you do, so we'll only email you when we have something really interesting to share with you. You can sign up for the free newsletter at strongerbyscience.com/newsletter, or just go to the Stronger by Science homepage and click the free programs button at the top. If you want to join in on the Stronger by Science podcast conversation, be sure to check out our Facebook group and our subreddit. The links for both are provided in the description of today's episode. Finally, please remember that we are not medical doctors or registered dietitians. So, before you make any changes to your exercise or nutrition habits, be sure to check with a qualified healthcare professional. Once again, thank you for listening, and we will be back soon with another episode of the Stronger by Science podcast.